Right, boys and girls, this video is basically refitting the sump and the oil strainer. Now, as you know, they're very primitive, these engines. This little oil strainer is no exception. All it consists of is a piece of gauze and a feed tube back up to the oil filter. So the oil filter does the most of the work. This just stops anything large which may or may not be in the oil. But it's very primitive, as I say. Now, if you remember, I did leave the oil strainer screws on the caps themselves. There's only two screws. They come with a little spring washer, and rather than lose them, I just leave them bolted onto the cap. So that's all we're going to do. I'm just undoing them off the, taking them off the caps. And the oil strainer is pretty self-explanatory. It's held on. You'll check it with your manual. It lays into place, and you'll see there's it's probably 3/4 of an inch. Make sure, always remember, guys, don't put anything in with a spanner. Tighten them with your fingers first. That's gone well located down into that location, and make sure your spring washer's on. And again, just screw that back into the top of the cap. It's not a big deal. Just get it located. Obviously, you've got to do a little bit of fiddling about till you get it lined up. But remember, guys, remember our motto, what we use on these old engines. Don't put your spanner on anything. I keep repeating it till you can tighten it up with your finger. Because when you've got it finger tight, you know it's going to go in. That's nearly all the way down. The same with the last one. Get yourself your little nut. Make sure you've got your washer on it. This one's slightly out of sight, I think, for the video, but I'll turn it around. And the other one's located on the top of this bearing cap here. It's a little bit fiddly, so I'll pause the video while I get it in for you. You don't want to be wasting time watching that. Right, guys, you'll see that there's one just down at the bottom there, and just give it a little nip up with your socket. They don't have to be rock solid tight. They're only holding the filter in place. Use your discretion. Don't be over tightening everything. Just tighten them so that you know it's secure. That's those two nuts tightened. Spin it round, and again you'll probably find you might need an adjustable for the, unless you've got spanners to fit. I sometimes have to use an adjustable. But again, get your spanner on. You're not over tightening all these bolts. You know it's gone down with your finger. Just give it a tighten, and just tighten it. Use your discretion, guys. Don't rave and chew them like you're fastening a cylinder head bolt. They don't have to be rock solid. Just tighten them up, and if you're happy with it, I'm quite sure it'll be okay. They don't need any more than that. Tighten it up, and that's job done. Now, our next job is the sump, fitting the sump. So what I'll do, I'll pause the video, I'll get my parts ready, and then I can use it the same video. Right, guys, this is the sump. Now there's two things I want to show you on here. I'll take this out. The sumps kit, the gasket kit, comes with two cork pieces like this, and in the bottom of the sump you'll see there's a recess. Now this cork fits into that recess, and it's always longer than you need, the cork. Now I've trimmed this one down already. But what I want to show you guys, you locate it, make sure it's pressed right in. Press it right into that recess. Now you'll see that it's probably that long on each side. Now we'll see that I've cut that down. In old-fashioned money, that's about 1/16 of an inch. And the reason I've left that proud is so that when the sump goes around that way, when the sump gets pressed down onto the block, it's going to press that cork and compress it. And I know that little piece there needs to be a little bit proud, so that when it compresses, it'll stop any oil weeping out the corner there. Right, so just leave that little bit proud. Just leave it slightly proud. Not too much, just enough so that it's just above, because it'll compress down, and you don't want it to be short because otherwise you'll get an oil leakage. So it's better that it's compressed down. And cork, as you know, is very soft, so it will compress. It will compress down, and I've done exactly the same on the other side. So what we do then, guys, we get our SUMP gasket. Now I'll just move the engine closer for you so you can see what's what here. Just bear with me, guys. These engines are getting heavier the more parts you put on them, so you've got to be careful when you're moving them about. They do actually get heavier, remember, but I don't use any engine stands, so it is what it is. Make sure you get your SUMP gasket the right way around. You can see it follows the contour of the block. That side of it's round, so it's pretty self-explanatory really. Just lay your gasket on. Make sure it's nice and secure there, make sure it's nice and snug. And it does fit it. Make sure it fits. Make sure it's the right gasket for the job. And again, we obviously would do the same with the other side. Make sure the gasket is the right way around and it's located in the right place. And you can see that, guys. The gasket's seated in the right place. They usually follow the contours of the engine block. So I mean, one side it looks like it doesn't really matter. But whichever way you're happy with it there, make sure it's following the shape, and more importantly, make sure that the holes are lining up for your screws and nuts to go in. Once you're happy with that, guys, you'll find that the SUMP, again, you can't get it the wrong way around, because if you look there, there's the round part of the SUMP there, and that fits the corresponding round part of the block. So make sure you've got everything secure. Drop your SUMP on top of your block. Give it a little knock down, because what you're trying to do, those cork gaskets need to compress, and they need to compress so you can press them fairly well down before you even start, so that you know it's located properly. And then our next job, guys, I'll just gather up the nuts and bolts and I'll come back to you. Right, our next job, guys, as you know, they don't take much tension, these nuts and bolts. So what they do, the engineers have thought of these little devices, and again, you put them on before you put the screw on. I've cleaned them all up because obviously they're going to be repainted when I've reassembled the engine. And all these do is to spread tension around the frame. So obviously you place these on before you place the bolts in. Clean them all up, because when you come to paint it, you don't want no grease on it, because your paint won't stick on the grease. So all those are located in place now. I'll just pause the video while I get the nuts and nuts and washers. What I will show you, guys, I don't clean all the engine all in one go. What I do it each piece that I use, I clean that particular part at the time, and I buy a gallon of this stuff, gunk, engine degreasing. I don't know what it is, 20 quid, something like that, but I use it very sparingly. And what I do, I don't fill the big bucket full of it and soak loads and loads of parts. I get each part, I have a little cleaning bowl like this. Now in this particular instance, I'm putting 7 nuts and bolts along there with washers. I've already cleaned up the 7, and I've got 7 nuts and bolts in there, and I just leave them in there. I clean each part as I need to use it. So they're in there now. You can leave them 5 or 10 minutes, go and have a cup of tea, come back, and they'll be nice and soaked, they'll be nice and clean. You can fish them out, wipe them dry, and you're not going to get oil all over your engine, and you're not going to have grease and oil where it'll affect the paint. So, and plus you've only used a very small amount of degreaser. Now that degreaser in there will clean the rest of the nuts and bolts and the other side pins, washers and spacers. So I've only used that bit, and then what I'll do with that particular dirty stuff, I'll wait till I've got another dirty part and I'll pre-wash it in that stuff, because it's clean enough to do another part, but I don't want to get loads and loads of dirty, greasy, oily gunk to wash my other parts in. So I use it very sparingly, and you'll get loads and loads of use out of 1 gallon. Believe me, it's well worth it. So I'll pause the video again and I'll come back to you. Right, guys, we've cleaned those up, and this is why you don't get bogged down with loads and loads of jobs, because you do each job, get your plan for the day, and today it's going to be the sump and the oil strainer. So we've got our engine ready to fit that on. I've shown you how I've cleaned everything up. I've inserted the gaskets and put the cork seals on and everything. We've made sure it's down. We aren't hammering it down flat, we're just leaving it resting on there, and we've pressed it down so that it just gives it a little bit. We've cleaned our 7 nuts and bolts. There's 7 on this side, there's 7 on the other side. When you put these in, guys, just remember the motto. I keep telling you because I want you to get it into your head. You must do that every time. No matter what you're doing, always put them in with your fingers first. And you can see these are nice and clean. They're not going to contaminate the paintwork that we've already done, and they're going to be easy to touch up. Once we've got all this assembled, I'll finish touching all the other nuts and bolts up that we've had on the job. So make sure the nuts and bolts only go in with your finger first. You might find some of them going easier than others, but regardless of however they go in, you must put them in like this first. And I'm not going to keep showing you time and time again how to tighten up nuts and bolts, but what I'm showing you is that all these little jobs that we do, they're all 15-minute jobs. Don't set yourself a task where you're going to be working for hours and hours and hours on a job, because you'll just get fed up of it. You really will, honestly, and it'll become an ordeal as opposed to a pleasure. These little engines, I actually do this as a hobby, and I'm happy just pottering around on these little engines. Come out and have a little half an hour on them, and the less you rush, the better job you'll do. Believe me, you will do a better job. Now some of these you just can't get right in. That these little corner ones in particular, I can't show you on that video, but that's quite hard to get in there. Now I'm still trying to put it in with my fingers because I know that that's the best method to use, and it is actually going in now. So you might have to struggle with some of them. And again, there's another one at that end which I know I can very barely get it in. But what you'll be able to do is put it on the end of your extension. Put the nut on the end of your extension. You can actually still get them in with your fingers, and actually just persevere. That's the main motto. Don't give up and don't rave it in. There's just one there that's just been a bit stubborn. Just bear with me, guys, and I'll come back to you. Right, guys, I did get all those in with my fingers. The cardboard's clear now, because all we've got to do is do the sides, 7 nuts and bolts. But what I'm going to do first, I'm just going to get my extension bar. There's no socket, there's no ratchet on it, and all I'm going to do, I'm just going to ease those nuts and bolts down. Just turn them down so that they just get started. You remember, guys, all these nuts and bolts are they're clean. There's no oil or grease on them, so some of them can be a bit tight. All you're doing, guys, is just locating them. You're not tightening anything down. You're not going to tighten them down even a little bit. You're just getting them to seat. Because what we've got to do first, we've got to go around to the other side of the engine and install the other 7 nuts and bolts. So this is just to make sure that these are not going to fall out while we're messing about on the other side of the engine. They're not. All they've done is just nip down. There's no tension on them or anything. Because what we've got to do is pull them down in. We do a couple at one side and then a couple at the other side. You'll need an extension bar for this, because believe me, you just can't get down. You can't get down without it, especially up at that end where the back plate is. So that's that right hand side. So that's that side of the engine done. What we're going to do then, guys, and I'm not going to show you how to do it. I'm just going to pause the video and I'm going to clean up the other 7, and I'm going to put them in this side of the engine. So that's all we're going to do now. So I'll come back to you in a minute, guys, when I've got those other 7 nuts and bolts in. Right, guys, I've got all the 7 bolts in on the other side, exactly the same as this. Make sure you put them all in with your fingers first. Now what I generally do is I generally just go around, start at the middle, and I just nip that middle one down. Not too tight, and I do the same on the one at the other side in the middle. Just nip it down, not tight, you're just tightening it down till you feel it start pinching. And what that's doing is just pressing the gasket in. But what it's doing, it's tightening the middle of the sump up first. Just nip that down a little bit. The next thing I do, I go onto the front corner where the cork is, and I tighten that one down. I don't tighten it fully, I just tighten it so I can feel it biting on the socket. And then I do exactly the same on the other side, on the opposite side. And all that's doing is pulling that cork gasket down onto the, onto the top of the bearing cap and the block. Pulling that on nicely. So just nip that down a tiny little bit and just keep going around there, guys. Do the other corner now, where the cork gasket is, just so it pulls it down onto the gasket. You're not tightening these right up, you just, all you're doing is just seating the nuts. You're not tightening them, you're not overstraining them, you're just pulling the sump nice and gently down. The cork is compressing as you're tightening that up. And then we'll do back to this side again. Just tighten it a little bit and then do the same on the corresponding side. Tighten it a little bit. We don't want to be straining anything. But what we're doing, we're pulling it down nice and evenly, so that when it does actually bite, it's compressing the gasket and it's not gonna, you're not straining any of the seal. They're very fragile, they're like that timing cover gasket. Oil won't flow uphill, and the oil in the sump is down at the bottom. This is all this is containing is the pressure, is the splashing. And the sump's not, it's not pressurised. The oil's not pressurised in the sump, it gets pressurised when it comes up into the pump. So it's not pressurised oil. So all you're doing is you're tightening these up, just pulling each one down just a little bit at a time until you're getting them seated. Do the same on the corresponding side. I don't need to show you the other nuts and bolts, guys, but believe me, they're all getting pulled down just a little bit. And I think, did we look in the torque settings for these? It wasn't very much. Was it about £6 or something like that? You guys perhaps will remember and I probably won't. But just go around, get all the nuts and bolts, and I'm not going to keep showing you it all, guys. Remember, the main part is never tighten them up with a spanner unless you can get them on. And I will go around and nip all these up. It could be £6, but look in your manual. If it's not listed, tighten it up only as tight as you need to. Don't go any tighter, because these, what it'll do, it'll just strip them out and then you won't get a seal at all. It's not very much to seal these. If you buy the expensive gaskets, not the cheap variety, you'll find that all the important gaskets are like a flexible rubber gasket, which means that they don't need nipping down as tight. The cheaper gaskets, they might be paper and they're not really much good. So just take your time, go around them. I'll pause the video and then I'll show you what else we're going to do. Right, guys, I've got all those 7 nuts and bolts in each side and I've tightened them all up. I don't know what the torque is, probably £6. Now what I'm going to tell you to do right now, if you're following the videos, this is the little tin of engine paint that I bought. It's 150 millilitres, 150, it's only a very small can. You can see how much I've used, not very much at all. It's very good paint, so use it sparingly, guys. And what I'm going to do, because the engine's upside down and it's difficult to swap them about later on, I'm just going to paint those nuts and bolts so that you can see there's not a big job to make the engine look nice. This paint is very, very good. You need the smallest amount, and I use this little artist brush. That's all I use on it, guys. So all I'm doing, I'm just going over the sump nuts and bolts. And I'll do this because once I turn the engine back over, believe me, these engines do get heavier as you're building them up. It'll get heavier and heavier. And an old guy like me, and you ladies that are doing it, I know there is a couple of ladies who are following this build, and thanks very much for your interest, and all you guys and gals. And you'll see there's a couple of little touch-up jobs that I need to do just on this bottom of the timing cover, just to tidy it up, because this engine, you want, if you're rebuilding an engine, you want it to look its best. I don't do the base of the sump because that's where it's going to be standing. So just do all the bits that you can see while it's upside down. Tittle up the little pieces that you've missed when you was rebuilding it, and you'll see that they're all painted in now. I'll just pause the video while I do the other side. Right guys, I've painted all those up now, both sides, because it's easy to do it while it's upside down, because once we've turned the engine over, we're not going to be looking at that anymore until we do the oil, you know, with the drain plug, etc. I've cleaned the brush. Just do it every time when you've done a little painting job. Clean your brush. And another important part is this paint's £9.50 for this 150mm. I think it's about £9.50, and I'll give you the information on that. It's off Fleabay, but it's very, very good. Lasts a long time. I probably do 2 engines at least with this tin of paint. But when you remember, what you must remember to do to make it better, when you finish, close the lid tightly down, turn your can upside down, and stand it there. Because if there's any film forms then on your tin, if there's any film forms, it's going to form at the bottom, not at the top, so you don't have to break the film. So remember, turn it upside down. That'll get all the air and it'll go to the bottom. You won't get a film on it, but that's a nice little tip to make your paint go further. And I just pop that back on my shelf along with my brush ready for next time. Now I'll pause the video guys, and I'll just turn this engine. Well, I'll show you how we do this, because these engines are getting heavier and heavier as we assemble them. But just to show you, I don't know whether there's any ladies might be able to do it, but what I generally do, I generally just pick the engine up like this. They are heavy, manhandle it round, and I'm a 70-year-old guy, but at the moment I can still lift this engine, and we turn him up the right way. Now I can actually lift this engine like so. It's not overly heavy, but you don't want to go straining yourself. So that's where we're at the moment guys, and then we're going to move on obviously to our next job. So we've got the engine back on its feet, so to speak, and then we'll carry on with I'll carry on with the other bits and pieces. So this is the end of this video. If you like the video guys, what you've seen so far, remember to subscribe to the channel. Any comments, I'll be happy to hear them, and thanks very much for watching.